Hello everyone, back again with movie and tune recap. Today, I'm going to explain an American psychological horror film from 2008, titled The Strangers. Spoilers ahead, so watch out and take care. What you are about to see is inspired by true events. According to the FBI, an estimated 1.4 million violent crimes occur in the United States each year. On February 11, 2005, Kristen McKay and James Hoyt returned to James's family's remote summer home after attending a friend's wedding reception, and the horrifying events that followed remain shrouded in mystery. The story opens with a 911 call from a terrified boy who, upon entering a house with his friend, discovers dead bodies and blood smeared across the walls. When the dispatcher asks for the address, the boy admits he doesn't know it, and this is where the story begins. That night, after the wedding reception, Kristen and James arrived at the secluded home, already facing tension in their relationship, unaware of the nightmare that awaited them. Inside the house, Kristen notices that James has prepared a romantic surprise for her. The place is decorated with roses, even the bathtub. After helping Kristen unzip her dress, James steps outside and leaves a voicemail for his friend Mike, asking him to pick him up in the morning, admitting that the plan didn't go well. While taking a bath, Kristen reflects on the earlier events at the wedding reception. She remembers how James had taken her outside and proposed to her, but she turned him down, and ever since that moment, James has been struggling with the pain of her rejection. After her bath, Kristen puts on a gown and joins James in the living room, where he is eating a bowl of ice cream. They share a quiet drink together, and unable to keep or return the engagement ring, James offers it to Kristen to hold on to. She apologizes for rejecting his proposal, explaining that she simply isn't ready for marriage yet. Frustrated, James leaves the room, but Kristen follows him, and their emotional conversation soon turns intimate, until they are suddenly interrupted by a knock at the door. When James opens the door, they are met by a blonde woman who asks if someone named Tamara is home. James tells her she has the wrong house, but before leaving, the woman says, "See you later," and walks away into the darkness. James notices that the porch light isn't working and fixes it, and as the couple head back inside, an unseen figure watches them from a distance. Kristen mentions that she's out of cigarettes, and since James plans to go for a drive anyway, he offers to pick some up for her. Before leaving, he starts a fire in the fireplace to keep her warm and mentions that his friend Mike will be coming by in the morning to pick him up. He then gets into his car and drives off into the night. Left alone, Kristen puts on some music and slips on the engagement ring James gave her earlier. When she tries to take it off, she realizes it's stuck, and she begins moving about the house, tidying up and keeping herself busy. While in the kitchen having a drink, she's suddenly startled by a loud knock at the door. It turns out to be the same blonde woman from earlier, once again asking for Tamara. This time, Kristen doesn't open the door, and she tells the woman she already stopped by, but the woman eerily replies, "Are you sure?" before walking away into the night. Moments later, the smoke alarm suddenly goes off. The fireplace is blocked and filling the room with smoke. Kristen removes the alarm from the ceiling, and it crashes to the floor, and suddenly, there's a loud banging at the door. Growing increasingly frightened, Kristen locks all the doors in the house and calls James, pleading for him to come back quickly, but the phone line suddenly goes dead. She plugs in her cell phone to charge, changes into jeans and a flannel shirt, and lights a half-smoked cigarette to calm her nerves. As she stands in the living room, unaware of what's behind her, a man wearing a sack mask silently steps out of the hallway, watching her from behind. Kristen walks to the sink to get a glass of water, and when she turns back around, the masked man has vanished. Another series of knocks echoes from the front door, and Kristen notices the smoke alarm, which had been lying on the floor earlier, now placed neatly in the center of a dining room chair. She rushes to grab her cell phone, but it has been removed from the charger and is nowhere to be found. Hearing something strike the wind chimes followed by a dragging noise on the back patio, she cautiously approaches the sliding glass door with a kitchen knife in hand. When she pulls the curtain back, the masked man is standing outside and suddenly slams his hand against the glass. Kristen screams in terror and stumbles into the phonograph, knocking the needle off track, causing it to repeat the same line from a country song. Moments later, the front door creaks open slightly, and through the crack, someone wearing a doll-like mask peeks inside. Kristen quickly shuts and locks the door, then hides in the bedroom, shouting for the strangers to leave. The vinyl record stops skipping, and she hears footsteps coming down the hallway. However, it turns out to be James, who has no idea what has been happening. The couple search the house but find no one, and James assumes Kristen is simply imagining things. They then see the blonde woman, now wearing a dollface mask, standing motionless in the backyard, staring toward the house. James goes outside to get his phone from the car, only to find the vehicle vandalized and his phone missing. As he crouches beside the car, Dollface touches the back of his neck and quickly runs off, reappearing a short distance away. He tells her to leave, and Kristen looks outside in alarm, and when James turns back, Dollface has disappeared. James returns inside, and he and Kristen find his cell phone placed on the piano with its battery removed, and realizing the danger, James decides it's time to leave. They rush outside and attempt to drive away, despite the car's slashed tires. Suddenly, a truck pulls up behind them, driven by another masked woman wearing a pin-up-style mask. The man in the mask steps in front of their car, and suddenly, the pin-up girl mask rams their vehicle from behind. James and Kristen quickly abandon the car and run back into the house. Inside, they find a shotgun and shells in the bedroom, along with the word hello written repeatedly in red paint across the window. As they approach the front door with the gun, the man in the mask begins hacking through it with an axe. They push the piano against the door to block it, and James fires a shot at him, but misses. They hide in a room down the hallway, keeping the gun aimed toward the open doorway. Meanwhile, James's friend, Mike, whom he had called earlier, arrives at the house, only for a rock to be thrown through his windshield. Hearing country music blaring from inside, he cautiously enters through the back glass door as Dollface emerges silently from the shadows behind him. Inside, Mike finds the house in complete disarray, and as he walks down the hallway, the man in the mask appears behind him, raising an axe. Just as the music suddenly stops, Mike steps into the doorway, and James fires the shotgun, hitting Mike in the head and killing him instantly. A moment later, James and Kristen realize in horror that they have shot the wrong person. The intruders mock them by painting the word killer on the back door, and determined to call for help, James heads to the barn to use the ham radio. There, he spots the pin-up girl emerging from the shadows and attempts to shoot her, but the man in the mask runs up behind him at full speed. While sitting outside, Kristen begins sensing the presence of the man in the mask in the house, and runs towards the barn. While running, she falls, twists her ankle, and as she crawls, she is unknowingly stalked through the front lawn by pin-up girl. Once she gets to the barn, she fiddles with the radio, but it is then destroyed by pin-up girl, before she can send a signal. Kristen crawls back to the house as Dollface sits on the swing set in the backyard and pin-up girl stands in front of the barn. Once inside, Kristen cannot find James, and as she makes her way to the bathroom, the power goes out. The man in the mask then enters through the front door, and Kristen hides in a pantry as he lurks around the living room. He leaves, and just as Kristen is about to slip out of the pantry, Dollface appears through the slits in the door shutters and smashes her way in. She pauses when she notices the engagement ring, and Kristen emerges from the pantry while Dollface taunts her by spinning a butcher knife on the counter. The man in the mask then enters the house, holding a defeated James by his shirt collar. Kristen runs to the bedroom and tries to escape, but the window won't open, and just then, the lights come back on. She creeps back toward the hallway, and upon reaching the doorway, the man in the mask rushes toward her, slamming her head against the back wall. She falls to the floor, and he drags her down the hall, Kristen is initially unconscious but soon begins clawing at the floor as the screen fades to black with her screams echoing. It is then daylight, and the three strangers loom over Kristen and James, who are now tied to chairs in the living room, and Kristen has been dressed back into her white gown. Crying, she asks, "Why are they doing this to them?" To which Dollface emotionlessly replies, "Because you were home." Each villain removes their mask, but the camera does not reveal their faces. The three strangers then take turns stabbing both James and Kristen before leaving in their pickup truck. As they drive down the road, they stop to talk to two boys delivering religious pamphlets. Dollface gets out of the truck and asks for one. One of the boys asks, "Are you a sinner?" and she replies, "Sometimes." When the children are out of earshot, Pin-Up Girl quietly says, "It'll be easier next time," and the three strangers drive off. The two boys approach the house and enter, finding a bloody and disastrous scene. James lies dead on the floor, and Kristen is in the hallway, having dragged herself a short distance from the living room, her white gown soaked in blood. One of the boys kneels beside her, and just as he reaches toward her, Kristen grabs his arm and screams in terror. Okay guys, that's all the recap about The Stranger from 2008. Thanks for watching, see you again in the next video.